I have to say the best part of this job is getting to meet and interact with, and most importantly, to be honest, to learn from some people that I can only describe as very high quality. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce one of those people this morning for the panel discussion to moderate, and that is Deodat Maharaj, who is the Managing Director of the United Nations Technology Bank for Least Developed Countries. I met him this summer in Istanbul, I believe, right, when we first met. And I proposed this panel at the summit, and to be honest, I was a little bit surprised when he said, okay, and actually helped organize it. It's a huge privilege. Mr. Maharaj has more than 25 years' experience. He previously served as Executive Director of the Caribbean Export Development Agency based in Barbados, and he was tasked with strengthening Caribbean business for international trade and steering investments into the region. And in that role, he spearheaded efforts to transform Caribbean business with a focus on innovation, digitalization, and technology. On the investment side, his sustained focus was on getting investments into the Caribbean that can also help drive innovation and the green economy transition. And he was previously Deputy Secretary General of the 56-nation Commonwealth and custodian of the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation. Deodat Maharaj understands the vital role of science, technology, and innovation as essential drivers for sustainable development, and particularly their vital role for the least developed countries to fast-track their development aspirations. He's lived and worked at various times in Tanzania, Mozambique, Suriname, Guyana, Barbados, New York at the United Nations, the United Kingdom, you love the weather, and of course in his native country of Trinidad and Tobago. Please give a very warm WAITRO welcome to Mr. Deodat Maharaj.
Thank you so very much, Secretary General Paul. I can state with conviction I don't deserve that introduction, but thanks nonetheless. I would just like to welcome my distinguished panelists, and we want to hear more from them than myself. Professor Hassan Mandal, President of WAITRO, Chairman of the Governing Council of the UN Technology Bank, Rector of the Istanbul Technical University. Welcome, Professor Mandal. We also have with us representing the Global South, and it is rare to have a panel with two nationals from Trinidad and Tobago on this panel, so I'm delighted that we have with us this morning Hans-Eric Schulz. Eric, please. And representing business. I love attending this conference. There's a big focus on innovation and technology and transitioning it to business and business opportunities. And I listened to Professor Liu and the president of G3 with such deep interest. I actually took notes about his data, and I very much value that vision of using technology and innovation and research to create business opportunities, and I add, to create opportunities and livelihoods for people, because that's why we are all here. We would also like to get, from the representing business, Jean-Marc Champagne. Jean-Marc, please. And I'm delighted that we have Dr. Wang representing the Jiangsu province. Dr. Wang, please do join us. And Dr. Wang is the Director General of the Committee of Science and Technology, Jiangsu Province. Previously, he served as Secretary of the Jiangsu Party Leadership Group and Director General of the Jiangsu Provincial CPPC. Dr. Wang and Eric and Jean-Marc and Professor Mandal, I mean, they're all very distinguished personalities and professionals. So I'm just delighted to be here. Why do we want to talk this morning about leveraging science, technology, and innovation? Because we have seen from the president of G3's presentation yesterday and others that it can make a big difference where it matters, on the ground and in the lives of people. This country, like no other, has taken 500 million people out of poverty in one generation. Nowhere in the history of civilization are we close to that. So there's much that we can learn from China. But having recognized the success of this country and the success of the work that you all are doing, my remit at the UN Technology Bank is to bring to attention the 45 least developed countries on the planet. The 45 least developed countries, they account for just 1.5% of global GDP. 1.5% of global GDP. We have been talking about sophisticated technologies that's making such a big difference, but internet penetration in the LDCs, or the least developed countries, stand at 25%. Life expectancy around 63 compared to 80 in a developed country. The amount of funds or percentage of GDP invested in research and development is less than 1%. No least developed country has invested more than 1% of GDP in R&D. And it's not that they don't want to, it's simply they can't afford to do so. But the challenges present opportunities as well. We are looking at a population of 1.1 billion people. So there is a sizable market and there is a sizable opportunity. So at the UN Technology Bank, we are keen to find ways to connect centers of excellence and technology and the institutions that are members of WAITRO to those in the least developed countries, to partner with them, build capacity in these institutions, do joint ventures, and create opportunities. I was very much intrigued with the presentations yesterday because there was a big emphasis on relevant, scalable solutions. But this audience and this really good turnout so early in the morning, it's not because of me, Professor Mandel, it's because you, Eric, Jamak, and Dr. Wang. So we want to hear from you. So the intention this morning is that we will not be assaulting you with presentations. We're going to have a conversation, and we would love and very much appreciate to have your inputs into this engagement, because we have brilliant people here, but we have really bright people in the audience as well. So we want to hear from you as we embark on this journey to put our heads together to figure out and explore possibilities on how can we work together to deliver solutions for our respective institutions, but also build partnerships and a bridge to the 45 poorest and most vulnerable countries on the planet, also known as the least developed countries. So the first person I want to ask a question to is Professor Mandel. His country, Turkey, which we have the honor of being hosted, they have done a great job in terms of supporting these 45 poor and vulnerable countries. I think doing development cooperation, and especially in the technical field, Professor Mandel, is not an easy thing. It could be quite difficult because the capacities that we assume don't exist in many of these countries. But based on your experience, President of TUBITAC, your present assignment, President of WAITRO, I mean, what do you think would be a good approach to build a bridge and build collaboration between an institution like WAITRO, what you have done at TUBITAC, and in your present assignment, and to build that bridge across to the least developed countries? What would be a good approach to your mind?
Okay, so thank you, Deodat. So, and very good morning. So the UN Technology Bank is for the LDCs has been based now in Turkey for a period of time from 2018. So I have been involved to representing my country in the board. So in the first instance, I mean, in a simple matter, thinking that transferring the technology from the developed countries to the for the LDCs, least developed countries. So in the first instance seems to be quite simple, but not the case. So because these countries is named 45 countries, there have been different type of priorities. And so it is not a kind of a technology has been developed in the so-called developed countries. So transferring to LDCs, I think one of the important fact that, so what they need. So in this respect, so I think one of the very important tool, what I have been learned during the, I mean, a member of the board of the council of the UN Technology Bank, is to defining the what technology need analysis. I think this is very critical. Otherwise, I mean, sometimes we think that, I mean, this is easy and they need this technology, but this is not the case. So I think one of the important facts as an academician, working with analytically, so to understand what they need. So in this case, so at least that, as far as I know, that most of the countries has been searched and the technology need analysis has been performed by the UN Tech Bank. I think it's a very important tool that, I mean, especially for the WAITRO. I mean, if you would like to work, and also some of the LDC countries, at least something like 8 or 9, are the member of WAITRO. So this is very important to start with and to extend to other LDCs as well. So I think kind of a use case. So we have a TNAs, so technology need analysis, for each country. And so certain of them, I said, a member of WAITRO. So make the good connection and start to communication. I think the second thing which I want to mention on the communication, the first one, to understand what they need. So, and this is, I think, available by means of the UN Tech Bank, by technology need analysis reports for each specific country. But second one is in communication. Because in the first instance, when we think that, I mean, okay, so we can start, but there is a special culture and it's not an easy, so therefore, again, in this case, the UN Tech Bank, I think is a kind of a right tool that to communicate with them. And in the other side, the WAITRO, so this, as I said, at least 8 or 9 of these countries are the member of the WAITRO. So there's a good potential between WAITRO and UN Tech Bank that the technology need analysis are available and start the communication by means of the using the tools of the WAITRO and also together with the UN Tech Bank. Maybe I think at this point that I would like to emphasize on these 2 points. Yeah. So to understand what they need and also make the right communication between the respective country and the WAITRO and the UN Tech Bank. Yeah. So I mean the UN Tech Bank and WAITRO, I think it's a very good closely partnership in this respect.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Mandel. And the issue of this technology needs analysis is really important because it's like a deep dive into the state of technology in the respective countries. Where are the gaps and which are the precise areas if you intervene or apply solutions, you can have the maximum possible impact because a least developed country, like any other country, the needs are infinite. So the issues of prioritization. So you're absolutely right, Professor Mandel. And continuing along this theme, I mean, I'm quite excited that we have you here, Dr. Wang. We heard yesterday about what has happened in this part of China in terms of results and in terms of technology and innovation and R&D. So can you tell us, Dr. Wang, how do you believe these least developed countries and the institutions in these countries can learn from the experience of China? And what you have done to build a really vibrant innovation ecosystem that is both sustainable and delivering results. What are some of the key lessons you think these countries can learn from your experience?
Thank you, Mr. Raj. Good morning, everybody. First, I'd like to tell all of you, Jiangsu was once one of least developed regions. According to the data of World Bank. In 1978, the per capita GDP in Jiangsu was only 174 US dollar. At the same level at the 129th country among the 134 countries and regions announced by World Bank. Mm-hmm. In 2023, it has exceeded the 21,000 US dollar, and it at the same level at the 50th country among the 189 countries and regions. So this is a very short story, but for me, it's my personal witness history, and I participate in the formulation and the implementation of STI policies in past 30 years. So I can tell you that the main reason such a great changes is that we continue to learn from our partner. Here are some examples. In 1990s, we learned from Singapore to build up high-tech parks. And last year, Jiangsu has 18 national and 32 provincial high-tech parks. All these high-tech parks, it occupied only 3% of total land here in Jiangsu. But it contributes 60% of R&D investment, 70% of high-tech industry output, and 80% of high-tech startup enterprise in Jiangsu. Another example is we learned from Japan how to increase investment in STI. Last year, the total R&D expenditure is 400 billion RMB. It accounts for more than 3% of GDP. Yeah. It's quite high for a region in China. As I know, the average level of OECD countries is around 2.3 or 2.4. In past 10 years, the annual growth rate of our R&D expenditure is 17%. Yeah. And the valid pattern, innovation pattern, increase rate, average increase rate is over 30%. Mm-hmm. So we learn from our partners, and what we learned played very important role in the development of Jiangsu, mm-hmm. In terms of economics and also STI. In past 40 years, the annual growth rate of Jiangsu is 13%. It's very high, yeah, in such a long period of time. The key contribution to the growth is what we call total factor productivity. That's a contribution of STI to the growth of economy. In last year, it's about 65% of GDP growth can be contribute to the improve of technology and innovation. This story of Jiangsu, I think, can happen everywhere. Especially, I just mentioned at the beginning the average income in Jiangsu, just less than $200 US. And G3 is also a good example. Actually, we learned from Germany to build international transport institutions, which is today's G3. You have seen the headquarter campus. You have learned, I think you have learned G3 now has 77 institutes and with 12,000 scientists and engineers, the largest institutes here in Jiangsu. They said the very first idea comes from Hofo in Germany. And what you don't know is that 11 years ago, my team was only a dozen people and a rented office. We do not have this at all. So, I mean, we can learn from others. We can make things happen. So it can happen here in Jiangsu. It's no reason to believe it cannot happen in another part. In other words, I firmly believe the OLCDs, they have the opportunity to do so.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wang. And we'll come back to you in the next round of questions. But it was interesting in terms of the sheer numbers. 11,000 scientists, you said?
G3?
Yeah. 11,000 scientists, 3% of GDP in R&D.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that really demonstrate a commitment. Countries like Turkey that's doing really well in this field is also making a similar level of investment. But what was interesting to me so far with this conference is that we have so many bright people coming from really well-established institutions doing fantastic work. But what I find interesting, Professor Mandal, is that there is a close connection with business. R&D linking it with business. And we heard Paul speak earlier today about the pitch competition, where people will present their ideas in terms of a competition. So Jean-Marc, I'm really happy that you are here, because you come from business, right? And in the least developed countries, the challenge is that these places are already fiscally constrained, already highly indebted. So to drive transformation from the perspective of innovation or technology or science, the private sector has to be a central, vital, important partner, okay? From your experience, coming from business, working in this space, Jean-Marc, I mean, what perspectives do you have to offer? And I want to come back to you after to be a bit specific, but I'm really eager to hear your views.
Yeah, thanks for that, Deodat. And thank you everyone for attending our session and WAITRO for having us here, Seneca Impact Advisors. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, so to answer that, I think the first thing to look at is, while the private sector, and me specifically more on finance, just to give a little bit of context of what we do and what is Seneca Impact Advisors, we're actually, our main focus is to drive private capital into nature and climate positive projects. And projects meaning that they actually have impact on the surrounding area and the ecosystems that they are working within. But to answer your question, Dita, in order to make the private sector thrive, though, you actually have to have the right government policies in place as well. Because if you don't have that, then the private sector is going to be, as you would say, treading water and not making a lot of progress. So a lot of these countries do have the right things in place now, and we are making progress in that space. An example, though, of what, I guess you can say maybe the policies aren't fully in place, what we're trying to influence is if we take Laos PDR, Laos, where we do a lot of work. We do work in, I guess the LDC countries that you want to talk about, or that we want to talk about. We do work in Cambodia, a little bit in Myanmar, and quite a bit in Laos. And in Laos, we started off with actually WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, came to us asking, how can we influence Lao PDR to get their economy off of the high dependency of hydropower? Now, while hydropower, everyone might think that's, it's good in terms of renewable energy, it's, climate neutral. There's a big downside to hydropower is that it actually impacts heavily on biodiversity and the ecological systems downstream from it. They cause a lot of damage. So, but with that said, the Lao economy is very dependent on hydropower. Most of their GDP is dependent on that, and their export revenue that they bring in is dependent on that because they sell a lot of the hydropower to the neighboring countries as opposed to using it internally. So WWF came to us, how can we get them off of the dependency of hydropower and start to push this forward, an agenda of alternatives. And so we looked at many different areas within Laos and what they can do. So we looked at different industries, and one that we came up with that had there's a strong potential for is coffee. The whole southern part of Laos is highly dependent on coffee, and they're a big coffee growing country. Actually, it's not as well known as some of the real big ones, but they produce really high quality coffee. So we have recommended that in order to start to sort of diversify income and also get export revenue, it's important to look at coffee, and a lot of that is very private sector driven, from smallholder farmers to actually collectives and co-ops that then sell coffee overseas. So we've come up with multiple ways to try to enhance that. Now, the big issue we've had with coffee and with Laos and how they do it is what they've done traditionally, even the private sector, and this is where we see the big potential in Laos, is that they've always exported the green bean around. So, for example, they would export it to China. China would then take it and they would do enhancements to the product, such as roasting it and selling it, and make 10 times the price, right? Well, Laos can do that themselves, and they don't do that. So they're a big export country, but they don't do a lot of value add. So we think we can add, or recommend to add, a lot to their value chain by increasing the actual value of the products that they produce. So these are the kind of things that we can do with these countries, and they have this potential to do that. Because right now, I think it's probably not the right thing to say, but the bar is low, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can actually capitalize on to jump a country like Laos up a few levels in terms of what they produce.
Yeah. No, Jean-Marc, that's really super interesting, because you mentioned coffee, but what the data will show, right, is that less than 5 cents for every dollar spent on a cup of coffee in Europe or the US goes to the farmer. Less than 5%. Value addition takes place lower down the chain. So the approach, I think, is a really sensible one, and it dovetails nicely into my compatriot Hans-Eric Schulz, because he's at Kariri, which Hans-Eric can speak about that more than myself, but I come from the Caribbean as well, and we heard you, Dr. Wang, and we've heard Professor Mandal and others as well. In the Caribbean, we don't have the scale individually because the countries are so small. So Hans-Eric is in a really unique position to share with us and to tell us, how does this model work, Hans-Eric? Kariri as an institution responsible for R&D, dealing with all these complicated jurisdictions and whatever other issues you have to deal with. You look pretty calm to deal with so many jurisdictions, but tell us a bit about this model that Kariri has and how it can work in other regions which are resource constrained. Many of them are also small, like those in the Caribbean.
Well, hello, good morning, and thank you for having me. Yeah. I appreciate it. Well, as Mr. Mirage indicated, CARIRI, Caribbean Industrial Research Institute, we cover both Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region in terms of research, development, innovation, entrepreneurship development and such. And generally, as he said, it's small territories. So right away, you're at a disadvantage for scale in terms of some markets and so on. What we have found from our experience is that starting at the lower end, simple things like certifications and standards differ among the different territories. So for instance, CARIRI, because of our experience, when we have small and medium enterprises who want to export throughout the Caribbean, we are familiar with all the standards for all the Caribbean islands. But of course, that increases the threshold of entry because now there's an extra cost for labeling, for packaging, for testing, and things like that. So a simple measure of standardization of certifications and standards within these smaller territories right away lowers the threshold of entry. And I'm saying this more in focus on small and medium enterprises because larger enterprises, both based in the Caribbean and externally, they can bear that cost and they can go in and meet the different requirements for each territory. However, what I think is important, and it's an undertapped market, not untapped, but undertapped, is the small, medium enterprises that want to scale up, that want to expand, and want to move forward. And the important thing for that is to lower the threshold of entry, especially for smaller markets. So right away, by standardizing standards and certifications, business in Trinidad or Barbados or Antigua, they only have to meet one requirement for labeling, for packaging, for testing. So they don't have to do that cost all over again for another island. And what I think is undertapped is that small and medium enterprises have such great potential for investment. But because of the grander investment is more, politically attractive and it looks grander, we underlook small and medium enterprises that want to expand. And therefore, I think we need to look at lowering that threshold. So just that immediate, simple threshold of standardization of certifications and standards right away, it allows an enterprise in one Caribbean territory to have that one-time cost for meeting certification, labeling, packaging, and so on, and they can expand right away without that additional cost. Also, as well, is a look at throughout the Caribbean territories for standardized policy on investment and taxation. I think that's something we hear about a lot in the Caribbean. Of course, for those who are not familiar, there's an economic community called CARICOM, the Caribbean community. And there is some degree of standardization in terms of that, but not to the extent that probably is fully, where we fully reach the fullest potential. Again, standardization of policy for investment, taxation, again, lowers that investment, not only for investors from outside the Caribbean region, but investors within the Caribbean region. Now, already the larger companies within the Caribbean, they do that. They have their teams of lawyers and their finance people, and they can crunch all the numbers and figure out all the, the nuances of each territory. But again, a simplification among territories and a sort of a streamlining of taxation and investment policy will allow smaller enterprises to lower that threshold for entry. And I think that part alone will allow for a much greater acceleration of economic activity. While we tend to focus on larger entities, small and medium entities come to us all the time for expansion into other markets. And right away, the cost, it goes up because they have to meet all these extra requirements. So again, simple standardization right away, that's an easy, well, I should say easy, but it's a straightforward fix that then you can then see for further expansion. And once that expansion happens, you will see greater activity coming from that smaller sector, mainly food processing. We have a lot of people in Caribbean who grow food and they sell in the local markets and so on. But we help a lot of entities process food where they have it in their homes or in their communities, and we help them scale up. And scaling up has two costs involved. One, scale up of equipment, scale up of how you do the process. The process changes when it goes from small to large because you have to take other things in consideration, temperatures, bacterial content, things like that, what type of machine you use. And also, beyond that now, once you've accomplished the production side of it, getting it to market, that's the second hurdle you have to come. And right away, your local market, yes, you know how to package it for your local, but right away, if you only have to do that packaging and labeling and certification once, right away you can package it and export throughout the Caribbean area. So Caribbean has been, again, we're familiar with all the standards for all the Caribbean islands. Indeed, we're familiar with all the standards for Europe and America because we have Caribbean producers that export globally, right? So we make it our business to know all these standards. So our in-house, we can advise on any standardization for environment, labeling, and packaging, and so on. So it's a lot of potential that has yet to see its fullest. And I think in that regard, Kariri has added that value because we offer that service at a much subsidized rate for smaller entities and medium-sized entities. Because we believe that once that economic activity accelerates, the state benefits a broader tax base, a broader economic employment opportunities, entrepreneurship development, because smaller people now can enter the market with a lower threshold of entry, and so on. These are very straightforward matters, but yet, of course, when you're dealing with different political entities and different countries, you have other considerations that may not always be so simple. So we understand that as well. But I'm simply saying this is one way to right away accelerate economic activity and tap into smaller entities or smaller enterprises and increase your economic base and taxation base. All governments will benefit from it. But that's what Cariri is there for, to assist in that regard. It will make our job easier and certainly make the smaller enterprises and companies at one time makes their entry point easier as well.
No, thank you so much, Hans-Eric, and it nicely complements what Jean-Marc had said earlier. Actually, I'm a bit more familiar with what's happening in Africa. I spent some years serving in Africa, and 33 out of the 45 least developed countries are in Africa. It's super interesting that you made this point on micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, because they account in LDCs in Africa, and indeed across the continent, for around 70% of total businesses, around 65 to 70% of employment, and close to 60% of GDP. And therefore, if you want to drive transformation, you have to connect the innovation ecosystem with this sector. It is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you can't drive transformation. But distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I mean, we have a really good panel. They stuck to time. They're quite focused. And we're doing really well in terms of time. Thanks to the distinguished panel. Do we have a question or a comment to any member of the panel before I go to the second round of questions? Any questions? Paul? Clearly. Yeah.
So thank you all for your comments, and I'm just really happy to see such a distinguished panel here at the WAITRO Summit. I guess my question to keep in your mind through all this is that it's good that we're discussing these ideas, particularly in this environment, but keep one thing in mind, the question, what can WAITRO do to move the needle and actually help? WAITRO as an organization, that its first job is to represent and advocate for its members, which are research and technology organizations. What should we be putting in place? What can we do to help?
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. Any other question or comment? Please, sir.
Thank you. Completing your suggestion.
Would you be kind enough to...
I am sorry. My name is Juan Sobreira. I'm from Spain, ITG Technology Center.
Buenos días.
Okay? Gracias. So sometimes one of the members here attends to a technical session with, for instance, Asian Development Bank, the last Thursday in my case. So I wonder if it's possible for you, or for any of you, to take into consideration that here we have a worldwide network in order to facilitate insights, because most of us are familiar, for instance, in Europe, providing insights to European working programs in research and development, and we are willing to collaborate beyond the typical geographical framework, and it is not easy. Yeah. And sometimes we made understand that there are a lot of possibilities trying to bring our previous experience to other countries and to collaborate with other potential partners around all the world. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Do we have a final question or comment? Professor Liu.
Maybe not the question, but some kind of comments.
Yeah.
Since I was born in the 60s, so when I was a child, I know enough food. So my dream, when I grew up, the job either to sell the meat or sell the rice, to be a salesman, and then I can have enough meat or rice at least. But from more than 40 or 45 years development after the Cultural Revolution in China, I can see we are experiencing the 3 stages of the development. The first stage, we have enough food. How? We just distribute the land to each farmer family. Let them to decide what kind of the agriculture they like to have. The rice or the corn or anything else. And let them to be free to sell on the free market, get the income. That's the very first stage. To be enough food. The second stage, as a socialist country, before the Cultural Revolution or during Cultural Revolution, actually before the 70s, we have no private companies at all. So how our industry come up? Because the government allow the private people, we can have private industries. That means we can let the people free decide what like to produce in the company, in the industry, and also can sell on the market. So this is 2 are very important, So if you ask how China can come to be like this stage from also the less developed countries, just like Dr. Wang he mentioned, the income per capita this region less than $100. That's the 70s. Even in the 80s, actually the early 90s, when I first time went to Europe, I lived in a hotel. Next morning, I asked how much it cost. It cost 5 months' salary when I was working as a lecturer in the university in China. So I think it's 2. Let the land, get a freedom to let the farmer can do, or let the people can have a private company. That's really the secret for, not a secret, everybody knows that. Yeah. So just have free market. But now come to the stage, I think the G2 will do the right thing, because now we need to upgrade. So now we need to also get a freedom for the scientists, for the researchers. How can they, to use the capability for innovation to help the industry. So I really like to thank Dr. Wang, because he's the Director General of the Jiangsu Science and Technology Commission. Is my big boss. My money, budget from his department. And he was at that position for 10 years. Even the chairman of our board changed 7 times during the last 10 years. But Dr. Wang and I, since we didn't change. So that's what we get this. So that's what I think at that current stage, how can we really encourage our scientists, not just publish, to have impact, research, to the society. So that's one of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I like the phrase impact research, impact investing, impact research. I think, Professor Manda, let's start with the two first questions from our friend from Spain and Paul, because this is a WAITRO summit after all, and you have this fantastic network of centers of excellence. You're the president of WAITRO as well, so it's I think Professor Mandal is the appropriate person to respond to that question. I mean, how do you see WAITRO connecting and providing support and building a relationship to support the weaker institutions?
Okay. So, I mean, at least I can share the experience. I mean, we have been together witness in the UN Tech Bank. I mean, for an example of Gambia, for example. I mean, it's one of the LDCs. I mean, when we looked for this country, what does it need to improve the value-added product? I mean, one of the, their value for them as a food industry, in the food industry, is the cashew-nut. I mean, in Turkey and also in Tubitak, we have the kind of an experience on hazelnut in terms of how can we make a value-added product. And in the first instance, we thought that, I mean, it is a straightforward, but it's not the case. So, I mean, a number of people, I mean, our researcher went to Gambia and checked what are the, so to see in local, so what they need. I mean, we have TNA, has been published by the UN Tech Bank, but it is not that easy that, I mean, if you are not be there, I mean, to see what type of facilities which they are available, and not only transferring the technology to them, to teach them and train them what they needed. So then, I mean, more recently, I mean, on October this year, I mean, about 16 people come from there, from Gambia, and to learn how we can increase the value-added product. So I think this is a very simple, but it is now it is a very fruitful discussion is going on. So this is, I mean, I am sure that, I mean, there are many kind of examples can be also be extended by means of the WAITRO network. And also other one, I mean, again, I was mentioned yesterday in the opening. So also increase the improvement of the talents. And in this respect, again, a project has been started with Niger. I mean, so to create a technology maker labs there, because there is a very young population. So not only transfer the technology for them to use it, so train them how can be design and develop the technologies. And in this respect, so there's a maker lab has been formed together again by UN Technology Bank. So I mean, I can give some more other examples. So in this respect, so especially starting with the, I mean, there's 9 members of countries who are already member of the WAITRO. Check with, I mean, get the right information also from the technology need analysis from UN Tech Bank, and also using the capacity of our partner members of WAITRO exist there, and to get the type of technology, not only transferring there, so train them in somehow what I have been explained. I think this is working at this from between Tubitak and the respective countries. Of course, the great help in terms of communication, because as I said, that the communication, I think, very important critical fact in this type of countries. So I am sure that, I mean, we will give more examples, maybe a kind of a special session in future again with UN Tech Bank in the upcoming WAITRO events.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Professor Mandal, with respect to being specific as well. because in terms of agriculture and LDCs in Africa, the data state that 30% of agricultural produce, already produced, is lost after harvest. In the cashew nut sector in the Gambia, it's 40%. 40% of cashew nuts produced is lost post-harvest, problems with storage, transportation, packaging, etc. So this project to reduce post-harvest loss is something very specific, very concrete. You reduce post-harvest loss 5 to 10%. I mean, incomes would go up, livelihoods will improve, foreign exchange earnings will be boosted as well. But Paul, to respond to your question, and our friend from Spain, I think the work that we do at UN Technology Bank to do these technology needs assessments, they identify very specific priorities. And I think a good lesson for us and next step for us is to connect with your partner institutions and with WAITRO itself to share, to start with sharing, saying these are the priorities, these are the issues, how can we help, where could we collaborate, these are possible good opportunities as well. So a much more systematic and organized collaboration. But we spoke about cashew nuts and agriculture as well, and I just want to go to Hans-Eric Schulz, right? Because how do we blend technology and agriculture or any other area to add value, Hans-Eric? And what have you been doing in terms of the Caribbean at the industry level to support business in terms of innovation?
Right, and that's a good question. Again, in the Caribbean, a lot of the operators and businesses are on a smaller scale. So the idea is to give them access to technology, to the innovative ideas and so on a cost initially that they can bear and then work upon. So we have at Kariri what we call a Center for Enterprise Development. It consists of a number of entities within that. For instance, one of them is our food processing center. And this is unique because we have a lot of, as I mentioned before, agro-processing entities, both small single people businesses, multiple family businesses, and so on. And at the food processing center, we have industrial scale processing for agricultural processing. And what we do, we allow small entities to come in to our food processing center and they can rent for a day or a couple of days, and we were using industrial scale material with assistance from our technical team on how to scale up, how to package, how to do the process more efficiently, and so on. So right away, they can see if this works for them, and also we can show them what is the best methodologies to utilize for whatever they are trying to do. It could be cassava, it could be most of them are ground provisions, or you could have jams and jellies, pepper sauces, which the Caribbean is famous for, and so on. And right away, they don't have to invest in industrial scale material. We have that, and we can show them what works best. And sometimes they realize, hey, maybe this is not the best approach to do it. But they can do that without spending the money on industrial scale equipment. They rent it again at subsidized rates with guidance from our team, and we can show them how to upscale to industrial scale for food processing, and again dealing with packaging and labeling and so on. And right away, they save that cost of investing. Now, once they see what works and what doesn't, then when they do invest in equipment, there's less avenue for failure. Because right away, they had a test run, so to speak, at Kariri's Food Processing Center, and they know what works best. They know what equipment they can get, and therefore it increases their likelihood of success. The second thing, again, we offer a lot of things. The second thing we do is what we call an IGAP analysis. It simply means an analysis of innovation. We look at their business processes, their procedures, and see where certain processes and procedures, innovative approaches, innovative ideas could be applied. And we assist them with that. We have a certain methodology, again, by which they can systematically analyze, and we teach them how to analyze their systems and processes to look for innovative paths that could be applied. Again, some of them, they may not have maybe necessarily university education, but they have spirit, and they have determination, and they want to succeed. And for me, that's half your battle won right there. Once they have that, you can give them that pathway and showing them how this is how the best way to do it. We have something called an idea advisory service. This is an interesting one because they can come in with just an idea, and we would sit down with them and analyze idea, and we go through to what we call a pretotype, not a prototype, a pretotype. That is, even before you develop a prototype, we can apply certain analysis tools that say, is this worth even going to prototype? Right, again, they save costs. Again, these are small, medium enterprises, and even some of the larger businesses come to us. So right away, cost of entry into production, entry into market is reduced because they reduce some of that risk and some of that possibility of failure. And then once the idea is filtered out through the prototype, then we can go, those that make sense can go to prototype and ultimately to final production and market. So that idea advisory service is one of our biggest draws because people come in with ideas, good ideas, but maybe they haven't thought it out all the way. And we sort of filter it out for them. We have a business hatchery service, again, showing small businesses how to scale up. Again, not just food processing, but even manufacturing businesses. We show them how to scale up. Scale up is another challenge for some. They've reached a certain level, they're comfortable, but they want to expand. They want to grow. Scaling up has certain challenges and certain risks and certain differences in the way you do things. Mm-hmm. So we assist them in scaling up. And again, all this application of knowledge and technical assistance lowers the cost of when they finally apply that information and knowledge and lowers the risk, ultimately, of failure. And one of the other things, we do a lot, but I wouldn't go through all of them, but one of the other things we do, we have a DIA, simply called the Democratization of Innovation in the Americas, which is a grant funded by the Trust for the Americas, where we take at-risk youth between 18 and 35, and we have them in programs to teach them about, yes, business and how to successfully do business and simple accounting and so on, but also about discipline. Mm-hmm. And how to structure your life even, you know. Some of them are young people that come from challenging backgrounds. It's not their fault that they're born into such a circumstance. But that program, exactly as it says, democratization of innovation in the Americas. It's democratizing innovation. Innovation should be available and applicable to all, regardless of where they started off in life. And that program seeks to apply that to those who may not have those opportunities. And that's a wonderful program. It's one of our successful ones. And finally, I'll do a last one. We have a program every July, August in the summer vacation called Innovation Nation Program. It applies to children, school children 10 to 18 years old. And again, we have different areas in coding, in climate action, solar installation, business application, entrepreneurship, and so on. And we train them. It is by remote. This year we did 3,600 students in Trinidad and Tobago. And coming out of that, we train them in whatever they choose, certain areas. Coding is one of them, for instance. And at the end of it, we have a competition where, and this is where it gets interesting, they get to apply what they've learned, especially in coding and app development, to real-world problems. And they have, the top 10 have to present to a panel of judges. We get corporate, we have been heavily trying to get corporate sponsorship, which we do. And the panel of judges includes corporate entities who know about business. The largest bank in Trinidad helps sponsor that as well. And they present it to say, this is my solution to a real-world problem. And the top prize, they get a starter bank account with 5,000 TT dollars, and so on. So again, the thing is that everything we do in innovation should not be exclusive. Innovation should apply to all. And entities in the Caribbean, under which Cariri serves, seeks to do that. Innovation should be available, and not all people may know where to begin. They can come to us because, hey, this is where you begin. And after a while, they realize, hey, this is not as overwhelming as I thought. Mm-hmm. You know, we have one called, I'll mention the company called Rent a Tutor, where you can tutor this lady. She opened up Rent a Tutor, and she actually has tutors available for our high school programs and so on remotely. you know, and she started through us. Very good idea. She's expanded wonderfully, and she's done well. So it's simply an thing that all this is undertapped market potential. And even corporate entities should realize that this is part of your bottom line. This is customers underserved. Once they do well in business, you do well. If you're a bank and you're lending, you lend them to expand, you do well. It could never go wrong. And the better chances they have of knowing where to start and how to proceed. And if corporate entities get involved in sponsoring and sort of funding some of those entities, it will pay back. It will pay back. It's never a losing situation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Eric. And going back to the point that you had made, Paul, what Eric cited, very specific, very concrete. So we at UN Technology Bank, we need to work with WAITRO in profiling your centers. What is the expertise that are available? What are the experiences that are available? Because what Eric is talking about, I can say offhand, because I spent some time working in the Pacific, they're directly related to the Pacific countries. They are directly related to the smaller countries in Africa, Lesotho, Swaziland, Seychelles, Mauritius, I would say as well. So there are very concrete and specific ways we can collaborate, but I think we need to connect better and more systematically with WAITRO. Dr. Wang, Eric spoke about innovation for all. So I was thinking about bringing you in the conversation a bit later, but I'm intrigued by your innovation ecosystem here, okay? Can you talk a bit more about this innovation ecosystem and how you were able to connect with not only the research institutions, but businesses and others? I don't think it would have cost a lot of money in the beginning. I mean, how did you do it? What was the experience?
Thank you. Very good questions. Actually, that's a question I'm thinking for more than 30 years. My first job in government, when I got the position in Jiangsu provincial government, my first job is to draft a plan to improve our ecosystem, innovation ecosystem. For me, as a policymaker or policy implementer, I think first you should have right mindset about ecosystem. There are a lot of misunderstandings of innovation and innovation ecosystem. So the two lessons I learned from my experiences, I think it's very important when you start to think to improve your ecosystem. The first one is the key issue is to adapt to local conditions. That's the first one. There are lots of books and magazines and lots of theories or models and a lot of successful practice and policies there. You can read, you can find, or you can hear. It's important, but it's just a start point. To build up a sound ecosystem, it takes time. It's a continual and incremental process. You cannot do all the things in the same time. So the second lesson I have learned is you should set the priority of your work in different stage, in different period. You should focus different elements. Ecosystem is a system which consists of many elements, and none of them none of which can be ignored. It's right, but you cannot pay the same attention to every element. For example, just as Professor Liu mentioned, Jiangsu has gone through a different period since 1978. In general, at the very beginning, it's a period of industrialization. In that time, first we should increase the yield of rice so we can track more farmers to go to the factory. But in that time, the first generation of private companies here in Jiangsu, the owners are farmers, construction workers, or street vendors. They never ran a company before, so all the workers are farmers, or their relatives, their neighbors. So in that time, they lack skilled engineer. So in that time, we focus on the talent mobility. We have a specific word in that time. It's called Sunday engineer. That means at every weekend, those owners, they will go to Shanghai to find good engineers to bring them back to their home, to their factory, to their company, to help them to improve their production. Next, we have a period of internationalization. A lot of FDIs and trade happened here. In this period of time, we focus on the technology transfer and also technology spillover. One lesson I learned, how much what can you learn is not depend how much the leading company have. It depends how strong you are in terms of innovation capability. How good your engineer is, how many skills your workers have. This is much more important than what the advanced company, what they have. So these two lessons I've learned, I hope will remind old policymakers when you draft or formulate your plan, your policy, first you should answer these two questions. For Jiangsu, recent year, well, we think we got to the went to the another period we call it modernization. So we place great emphasis on open innovation, on the international collaboration. When you were the follower, far behind the leader, well, yeah, you need efforts, but it's relatively easy to catch up because there are lots of solutions there you can choose, but adopt to your local condition. That will make the change. But when you're close to the leader, it's another story. You need totally different strategy. So open innovation and sound ecosystem play vital role in this stage. So here I want to share with you some basic ideas and practice of Jiangsu government. Our government, first, I think the very important thing is the government, Jiangsu government firmly believe invest in STI can bring economic benefit through higher level of GDP, productivity, and employment. It's a vision, it's an idea, whatever you call it. But without this mindset, you cannot, I think, you can do nothing about innovation. You have right mindset, the next you have right policy instrument. For example, in recent years, we implement specific policy to stimulate R&D and innovation activities, both in public and private sectors. Set up new type R&D institutions such as G3. We want to bridge our business and industry sectors, and at the same time bridge the local and international resources. And also encourage universities to work closely with business. It sounds very good, but when you do it, it's very difficult here in Jiangsu. And enhance IP creation protection, because we invest heavily on R&D. Every year, thousands and thousands of new patents issued and applied. So for Jiangsu, there is simply no reason we don't care about IP protection. And also promote technology transfer and commercialization by development of high-tech parks and incubators, especially the state, the private invest in incubators. At the very beginning, on the government, they have money or they want to invest in incubators, but more and more gradually, the private capitals come in. We have a large amount of VC funds, and I think 85% are come from private sector. And also, last but not least, promote international collaboration partnership. And my department have a very close relationship with many countries. Our government signed a joint funding program with UK, Finland, Singapore, Norway, Czech Republic, Australia, Israel, and a lot of countries. They want to work with us to put some money together to support this kind of collaborations. And also, our government sponsored WAITRO Secretariat. From personal, it's one of my dreams to attract WAITRO to put their secretariat here in Jiangsu, because I believe that will bring benefit both for Jiangsu and for WAITRO partners. So in the last couple of years, after the academic, the first stop of my international traveling is South Africa. So some of my friends sitting there, I go to Colombia, Peru, and Chile, and this year they come back to Jiangsu all the professors, scientists, they are very excited. They said, well, there are a lot of opportunity there.
We're excited as well.
Yeah. So it's take time. It's hard work to build up a sound ecosystem, but it deserves to do so.
Yeah. No, thank you so very much. And I wanted to connect the point that you made about tech transfer, for example, and WAITRO, Paul. I mean, and you made the point about thousands of patents being presented every year. The data for the least developed countries in 2020, the total amount of patents proposed by 45 countries amounted to 1,157. So that's another reason why we need to find ways and explore concrete opportunities for to put one institution in contact with another based on evidence and based on analysis, because this example of what you have done here is truly inspiring. Jean-Marc, we want to hear from you in terms of, let's go back to business again, right? We heard about business environment, we heard about challenges. From your standpoint in Laos, I mean, you want to drill a bit deeper in terms of how such a model can be replicated?
Yeah, sure, do that. And before I get into that, I just want to address, there was some of the questions in Paul's in particular on what can WAITRO, what can we do or what can WAITRO do? The one big area that we're not talking about as much, we're talking about technology, talking about innovation and knowledge, and science, but finance, right? And as we know, money, basically, for good or bad, drives most of what we do. So a big area that WAITRO can get involved with is attracting more, whether it's investment capital or grant capital or some kind of concessionary capital to the work and the partners and the projects that they're currently doing. And how can that be done? Well, the big area is really looking at impact and looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. How can WAITRO drive further into the Sustainable Development Goals and the projects that they're working on? That's a good opportunity for WAITRO to attract this kind of financing. And then just also to sort of address what the professor had said about, back in the 60s and 70s. It took policy, just on because that's kind of what I said in the first part. It took policy to get the private sector going, right? Now, that was that's a prime example of how if the right policy is not in place, the private sector is not going to go anywhere. So the private sector is only as good as the policy that is in place. And that is especially true with what we want to call the green world or the sustainable world, sustainable finance world. That's absolutely essential that we have that in place. And then to talk about, we had mentioned, and I just want to also bring this up, we had mentioned points of wastage, and you talked about different industries and where the food and things that are produced, doesn't even get to the end customer, right? So there's a lot of areas that you can capture on that. One thing that we're doing in Laos actually is separate from our coffee project, but we're developing and working on projects that utilize food waste, right? Because we have about 40, depends on where you are, 40 to 60% of food is completely wasted before it even gets to the end user, right? So we can look at things like black soldier fly, right? And how that can work on capitalizing on food waste, right? So you have that black soldier fly, it feeds on the waste, the larvae, and then you can use it for animal feed, you can use it for, whether in live form or in dried pellet form, you can use it for protein enhancers, you can use it for the cosmetic industry, pharmaceuticals, so there's many things that you can do to capitalize on waste. And that's something we think is absolutely essential for LDC countries like Laos, for example, because of that waste, because they don't have cold chain in place. They don't have things that preserve the food and keep it from getting wasted. So we want to implement things like that in countries like Laos. But just to go into, and one other thing just to address, just on when Hans Erik was talking about his organization does. We are also not just driving capital, but we're trying to, in not only scaling companies, but we're also looking at them, and we realize that at their current stage, they're not investable. We need to help them get to that point, and that's what we are also doing. But we do it for companies that are really only focused on, you know, the environment or enhancing, or which we say nature and climate positive. But to drill down into the particular project, in what we're, one of our, I guess you can say, our key projects in Laos is looking at coffee, sustainably grown coffee. In this case, it's in, coffee typically is in Laos, the majority of it is grown in the southern region of Laos, in Champasak, in the province. But this particular project is in the northern part of Laos, actually really close to the Chinese border, in a town or city, I guess, called Luang Namta. And the idea behind that is to empower a lot of the minority villages and work with the farmers. And there's about 75 to 80 households that we're working with to empower them as in farming. But the idea behind sustainable coffee is to move away from monoculture, because monoculture, whatever crop you're producing, whether it's coffee, rice, cassava, bananas, that has destroyed the jungles and the forests of these countries, and especially in Laos. When we drove through, we were just there 2 weeks ago, into the mountains, you can see all the deforestation that has happened. Now, what sustainable coffee does is to grow it within what we call canopy-covered or shade-grown coffee. So you grow it under a canopy. So we're actually replanting forests, and we're replanting trees, and we're multi-cropping or polycropping as opposed to monocropping. So you're growing coffee, as actually naturally always has been, but you're growing it under this canopy. So there's huge benefits to that. One, obviously reforestation. Then you also have carbon sequestration. Then you also have less use of pesticides, which is absolutely critical, because pesticides, as we know, it's a huge problem, and especially with groundwater runoff, that's a massive issue. Also, this uses it's less water intensive in order to grow it. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And because it's a premium crop, and we're doing a lot of value add to it beyond just selling the green beans, we're actually roasting it and selling it into Europe. The owner is actually, the business owner is Dutch, and he's been inspired by this whole thing to really work in the northern plateau as opposed to the southern Balaban plateau to really make this happen. But it's a higher quality product, and it can actually bring in higher prices, and that can actually be translated back down to your 5% going to farmers. As you said, this will actually increase their incomes massively. So that's what we're doing with this particular project, and this is one that we really think if we get the financing right, we get the product, the whole management of the company right and of the project right, we can really have a lot of benefits to not only the planet, but also to humans.
Thank you so much. So now we are 2 minutes before 10. So panelists, we are at a delicate juncture. We are separating this wonderful group of people here from their coffee break. So I think what we should do, if you'd kindly indulge me, we give our panelists the opportunity to make a quick final comment. And I will summarize maybe in less than a minute, and then we will bring closure to what has been a fascinating session. So Dr. Wang, shall we start with you? Lesson, perspective, short comment, final piece of advice to us. You have done it. So yeah. Any final words? 1 minute. Yeah, one sentence. Yeah, let's see. These are all brilliant people here, so it's very difficult.
In one sentence?
I like that, one sentence.
We pursue a long-term partnership.
Yeah.
And win-win mutual benefit goals with our partner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wang. Jean-Marc.
Yeah, I would say partnerships are absolutely critical, but as is attracting private sector finance. We won't be able to get to where we need to essentially save the planet and ourselves if we don't get the capital that is needed into the work that we're doing. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, money. Yeah. Eric?
I think the WAITRO membership and its broad diversity of organizations across all geographic areas represents a unique opportunity for collaboration.
Yes. Yeah.
And collaboration on different strengths. And of course, financing and accessing financing obviously is one of those, but turning those technical skill sets and technical focus into commercialized markets, and commercialized products. I think that dynamic among such a unique organization of WAITRO, I think is something that, again, we still have some way to go, but we're getting there, and I think WAITRO is one of those hubs that those things can happen on a global scale.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. Professor Mandel?
Okay, so I think so the message from my side is that there are more potentials, and we need to learn each other. And also, in this respect, so the talents are becoming more important to make it sustainable. And in this case, so the WAITRO is providing as a platform, but also, I mean, like UN Tech Bank, I mean, also know what are the priorities for the specific needs in the respective countries. So this is giving a kind of a platform to work together.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And from my perspective, the theme of this topic of this discussion was leveraging science and technology, or leveraging knowledge to drive science, technology, and innovation, and to drive transformation. And it was so wonderful to hear, you know, very concrete and specific perspectives offered, and as well as clear advice given. I mean, the job that we have with the UN Tech Bank is quite simple. Our mandate is to use science, technology, and innovation to help the world's poorest countries fast-track their development. For us to do that, Paul and colleagues and our friend from Spain, we need to collaborate as well. So I think there's ample room for WAITRO and its membership to work collaboratively with each other, of course, as that is happening, and amongst centers of excellence and institutions. But we want to work and bring a group of countries into the membership as well, because we see immense benefits. Because my remit and mandate and focus is obviously the 45 least developed countries. But there's so much synergy from what you have said. So I think our next step, Paul, is that we will spend some time talking, drilling down a bit further in terms of the respective composition of the membership, match needs and strengths with countries that need support in terms of specific areas, and perhaps we can spend the next month or so doing a roadmap so we have a very clear idea going forward, and maybe Professor Mandel agreeing to work maybe in a few countries in the first instance, because there's such a rich body of experience and expertise, and it's difficult for me to summarize. I mean, this has been a really wonderful engagement. We went over the time, and my apologies, please, by a mere 3 to 4 minutes, but I apologize nonetheless. But I think we had a really interactive and engaging session, thanks to you, and also to this wonderful group of distinguished panelists. So please join me in expressing our deepest appreciation to them.